The stagecoach lurched to a halt outside the general store in Parowan, Utah Territory, sending up clouds of red dust that clung to everything they touched, and Elena Ortega knew before she even stepped down that this place would be nothing like home. The year was 1878, and she had traveled all the way from Barcelona, Spain, carrying little more than a worn leather trunk and the address of her late uncle's trading post. The journey had been long, dangerous, and lonely, but Elena had nowhere else to go. Her parents had died of fever the previous winter, leaving her with debts she could not pay and relatives who saw her as a burden. When the letter arrived informing her that her mother's brother had passed away and left her his small business in the Utah Territory, she had sold everything she owned to purchase passage across the Atlantic, and then across this vast, strange country. She stepped down from the coach, her black traveling dress dusty despite her best efforts to keep it clean. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, so different from the Mediterranean warmth she knew. Everything here felt harsher, drier, more unforgiving. "That is all?" the driver asked, tossing down her trunk with little care. "Yes, thank you," Elena replied, her English heavily accented despite years of study. She had learned the language from books and her uncle's letters, but speaking it was another matter entirely. The driver gave her a strange look before climbing back onto his seat. Within moments, the coach was gone, leaving her alone on the dusty street. Elena looked around, trying to orient herself. Parowan was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings and false-fronted stores arranged along a single main street. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing against the brilliant blue sky. A few people moved about their business, but several had stopped to stare at her. She picked up her trunk, struggling with its weight, and made her way toward what appeared to be the largest building, a two-story structure with a sign reading General Store and Post Office. As she entered, a small bell chimed above the door. The interior was dimly lit after the brilliant sunshine outside, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from canned goods to farming implements. Behind the counter stood a thin woman with gray hair pulled back severely from her face. "Help you?" the woman asked, her tone clipped. "Yes, please. I am looking for the trading post that belonged to Miguel Ortega. I am his niece, Elena." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "You are the one from Spain?" "Yes. I have just arrived today." "Well." The woman looked her up and down with an expression Elena could not quite read. "The trading post is about half a mile east of town. You will see a wooden building with a corral beside it. But I will warn you, it has not been occupied since Miguel died 3 months ago. Might not be in the best condition." "I understand. Thank you for this information." "You talk awful funny," a voice said from the corner of the store. Elena turned to see 2 young women, both dressed in practical calico dresses, watching her with undisguised curiosity and something less friendly in their eyes. "I am from Spain," Elena said, trying to smile. "English is not my first language." "Spain," one of them repeated, drawing out the word mockingly. "Well, you are in America now. We talk normal here." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "I am trying to learn your way of speaking. It takes time." The woman behind the counter cleared her throat. "That is enough, Clara. Leave the girl alone. She has had a long journey." Clara and her friend exchanged glances, but they said nothing more, though Elena could hear them whispering and giggling as she left the store. The walk to her uncle's property was harder than she expected. The trunk was heavy, and the road was little more than packed dirt with deep ruts from wagon wheels. By the time she reached the trading post, her arms ached and sweat had soaked through her dress despite the dry air. The building was indeed in poor condition. The wooden walls were weathered gray, and one of the shutters hung loose from its hinges. The corral fence had several broken rails, and the whole place had an air of abandonment. But it was hers, and that meant everything. Elena set down her trunk and pushed open the door. Inside, dust covered every surface. Her uncle had sold dry goods, leather items, and supplies to travelers and locals alike. The shelves were mostly empty now, though a few scattered items remained. A counter ran along one wall, and in the back, she could see a small living area with a pot-bellied stove, a narrow bed, and a table with 2 chairs. She spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning, sweeping out months of accumulated dust and dirt, shaking out the bedding and taking inventory of what remained. It was not much, but it was a start. She would need to purchase stock if she hoped to reopen the trading post, and she had very little money left after her journey. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of orange and gold, Elena sat at the small table and allowed herself to cry. Everything felt overwhelming. The language, the customs, the landscape itself. She had never felt so alone in her entire life, but crying would not solve anything. She wiped her eyes, lit the oil lamp, and began making plans. The next morning, Elena rose early and dressed in one of her simpler dresses, a dark blue cotton that would show the dust less. She had decided to walk back into town and introduce herself properly, perhaps find out what goods were most needed, and determine how she might begin to rebuild her uncle's business. The walk was easier in the cool morning air. Parowan was just beginning to wake up, with shopkeepers sweeping their porches and the smell of coffee drifting from somewhere down the street. Elena made her way to the general store again, hoping to speak with the proprietress in more detail. As she approached, she heard loud voices. A group of men stood outside the livery stable across the street, and they seemed to be arguing about something. Elena tried not to stare, but one of the men caught her attention. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin, wearing worn denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. Even from a distance, there was something different about him, a quiet confidence in the way he stood. "Well, look who it is," a familiar voice called out. Clara from yesterday was standing on the porch of the general store with 2 other women. "The Spanish girl, what brings you back to town? Already tired of that old shack?" Elena lifted her chin. "I came to purchase supplies. I am reopening my uncle's trading post." "Reopening it?" One of the other women laughed. "With what? Miguel did not have 2 coins to rub together when he died." "I will manage," Elena said firmly. "Talking all high and mighty with that funny accent," Clara said. "You know, we have enough outsiders here without you bringing your foreign ways to town." "I am not trying to cause problems. I only wish to make a living." "Make a living?" Clara mimicked her accent cruelly, and the other women laughed. "Maybe you should go back to where you came from." Elena felt her face burn, but before she could respond, a deep voice cut through the conversation. "That is enough." Everyone turned. The tall man from across the street had crossed over and now stood a few feet away. Up close, Elena could see he had gray-green eyes and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. There was something weathered about him, but he could not have been more than 30 years old. "Stay out of this, Samuel," Clara said, though her voice had lost some of its edge. "I do not think I will," the man said. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable authority. "This woman has done nothing to deserve your rudeness. She is new to town and trying to make an honest living. Maybe you should be welcoming instead of cruel." Clara's face reddened. "She talks funny. She dresses funny. We do not need her kind here." "Her kind?" Samuel's voice grew harder. "You mean someone willing to work hard, someone who has traveled halfway around the world to start over, Seems to me that is exactly the kind of person this town needs." The women muttered among themselves but said nothing more. After a moment they turned and walked away, though Elena could hear them whispering angrily. Samuel turned to Elena and touched the brim of his hat. "Madam, I apologize for their behavior. Not everyone in Parowan is so unwelcoming." "Thank you," Elena said softly. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did. No one should be treated that way." He paused, then extended his hand. "Samuel Lawson, most people call me Sam." Elena took his hand, surprised by the warmth and strength of his grip. "Elena Ortega. I am pleased to meet you. You are Miguel's niece. I heard you had arrived. I was sorry to hear about your uncle. He was a good man. Sold me my first saddle when I came to the territory. You knew him. Not well, but he was always fair in his dealings. That counts for a lot out here." Samuel shifted his weight slightly, and Elena noticed he wore a gun belt, though it seemed more practical than threatening. "Are you really planning to reopen the trading post?" "I am, or I am trying to. I need to purchase stock, but I have limited funds at the moment." Samuel studied her for a moment, and Elena had the distinct impression he was seeing more than she intended to show. "That is a hard business even for someone who knows the territory. No offense, madam, but you are new here. You do not know the suppliers, the customers, what goods move and what does not." "Then I will learn," Elena said, lifting her chin. She had heard enough people tell her what she could not do. "I have no choice. This is all I have." Something shifted in Samuel's expression. A slight smile touched his lips. "I believe you will at that. Tell you what. I run cattle about 10 miles north of here. I come through Parowan regular for supplies and to check on my horses. I know most of the ranchers and farmers in the area. If you like, I could introduce you around, let people know you are open for business once you get stocked up." Elena felt a surge of gratitude. "You would do that for me. Why not? This town could use some new life, and anyone willing to stand up to Clara Peterson deserves a fighting chance." His smile widened slightly. "Besides, I like the way you talk. It is different, but different is not bad." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest, and it had nothing to do with the morning sun. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. That is very kind." "Sam," he corrected. "And it is not kindness, just common decency. Something this town could use more of." They talked for a few more minutes. Samuel suggested she speak with a supplier in Cedar City who might extend her credit based on her uncle's good reputation. He also offered to help her repair the corral fence, mentioning he had some extra lumber from a recent project. As they spoke, Elena found herself studying him. Samuel Lawson was not handsome in a refined way. His features were too rough, too weathered by sun and wind. But there was something compelling about him, a straightforwardness that she found refreshing after the veiled hostility of the town women. When he smiled, which was not often, it reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. "I should let you get to your shopping," Samuel said eventually. "But if you need anything, my ranch is north on the main road. White fence, red barn. Anyone can point you the right way." "Thank you again, Sam." He touched his hat brim once more and walked away, his long stride carrying him toward a handsome sorrel horse tied outside the livery. Elena watched him go, feeling something she had not felt since arriving in the territory. Hope. Over the next few weeks, Elena worked harder than she ever had in her life. She cleaned every inch of the trading post, scrubbed the floors until they shone, and repaired what she could. Samuel was true to his word. He arrived one morning with lumber and tools and spent an entire day fixing the corral fence. He refused payment, saying it was the neighborly thing to do. She took his advice and traveled to Cedar City on the weekly freight wagon. The supplier there, an older man named Mr. Henderson, remembered her uncle fondly and agreed to extend her a modest line of credit. She purchased basic goods: flour, sugar, coffee, canned vegetables, fabric, thread, basic tools, and leather goods. It was not much, but it was enough to open the doors. Samuel also kept his promise about introductions. He seemed to know everyone in the territory, and he made a point of bringing people by the trading post. Ranch hands needing new gloves, farmers looking for seed, women wanting fabric or thread. He always introduced Elena warmly, his presence somehow legitimizing her in a way her own efforts had not. "Sam Lawson vouches for her. She must be all right," she heard one man say to another. Business was slow at first, but gradually people began to trickle in. Most were polite, though some could not hide their curiosity about her accent and appearance. A few, like Clara and her friends, remained openly hostile. They spread gossip that Elena was trying to take advantage of the community, that her prices were too high, that she did not understand American ways. It hurt, but Elena tried not to let it show. She focused on her work, on treating every customer fairly, and on learning everything she could about life in the Utah Territory. Samuel became a regular visitor. He stopped by at least twice a week, sometimes to purchase supplies, sometimes just to check on her progress. They fell into an easy friendship. He taught her about the local customs, the unspoken rules of frontier life. She told him about Spain, about the narrow streets of Barcelona, the Mediterranean Sea, the festivals and traditions of her homeland. "It sounds beautiful," Samuel said one afternoon as they sat on the porch of the trading post, drinking coffee and watching the sunset. "Why did you leave?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "I did not want to, but my parents died and I had no one. My uncle's letter came like a gift from God. A chance to start over, to build something of my own." She paused, though I did not realize how hard it would be. "Hard how?" Samuel asked gently. "Everything. The language, yes, but more than that. The way people look at me, the way they mock how I speak, how I dress, the foods I eat. Sometimes I feel like I will never belong here." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. "I understand more than you might think." "You do?" He nodded slowly. "My mother was half Ute. My father was a trapper who fell in love with her against both their families' wishes. I grew up between two worlds, not quite fitting into either, too Indian for the white folks, too white for the tribe." He turned to look at her, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes. "I know what it is like to be the outsider." Elena felt her throat tighten. "I did not know. I am sorry." "Do not be. It made me who I am. It taught me that what matters is not where you are from or how you talk, but what you do, how you treat people." He smiled slightly. "And it taught me to appreciate people who are different, because different usually means interesting." "Is that why you helped me?" "Because you understand, partly, but also because I think you are remarkable." The words hung in the air between them. Samuel seemed to realize what he had said and looked away quickly. "I mean, it takes courage to do what you are doing, coming to a new country, starting a business alone. Most men would be intimidated by that, let alone a woman on her own." Elena felt her heart beating faster. "I do not feel courageous. Most days I feel terrified." "That is what courage is, being terrified and doing it anyway." He stood up, suddenly restless. "I should get going." "Early start tomorrow, Sam." Elena stood as well, moving closer to him. "Thank you for everything. I do not know what I would have done without your help." He looked down at her, and for a moment something passed between them, an awareness, a recognition. Then he smiled, touched his hat brim, and walked to his horse. Elena watched him ride away, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart raced. She was beginning to realize that her feelings for Samuel Lawson went far beyond gratitude. As summer turned to fall, the trading post began to truly thrive. Word had spread that Elena was honest, her prices fair, and her selection good. More people came, and with them came acceptance, at least from some quarters. She made friends with a few of the ranch wives who appreciated her European fabrics and her willingness to special order items from back east. But the core group of town women, led by Clara Peterson, remained hostile. They made snide comments whenever Elena came to town. They whispered behind her back and sometimes even to her face. They criticized her clothing, her accent, her unmarried status, everything they could find fault with. Unnatural, a woman running a business alone, Elena heard Clara say one day at the general store. Who knows what really goes on out at that trading post, especially with Sam Lawson visiting so often. Elena felt her face burn, but she ignored the comment and finished her transaction. She would not give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Samuel, however, was less patient. When he heard the gossip, his jaw tightened dangerously. "You need to stop," he told Clara one afternoon in the middle of the street. A small crowd had gathered, sensing conflict. "I can say what I please," Clara shot back. "And it is suspicious. A single woman and a man visiting all the time. What are people supposed to think? People are supposed to think I am being neighborly, which I am. Elena has done nothing wrong, and neither have I. If you spent half as much energy on your own life as you do gossiping about others, maybe your husband would not spend every evening at the saloon." There was a collective gasp from the onlookers. Clara's face turned bright red, and for a moment, Elena thought she might actually strike Samuel. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed away. The incident only seemed to make things worse. Clara doubled down on her campaign against Elena, convincing several women to stop shopping at the trading post. Business dipped noticeably. Elena tried not to let it discourage her, but it was difficult. She had worked so hard, and it seemed like no matter what she did, some people would never accept her. It was during this low point that Samuel showed up at the trading post one evening just as she was closing. He looked troubled. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Elena felt a flutter of anxiety. "What is wrong?" Samuel removed his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. "I have been thinking about this situation with Clara and the others, the gossip about you and me. I know. I am sorry you have been pulled into this. That is not what I am worried about. I am worried about you, your business, your reputation." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "Maybe I should stop visiting so often, let things settle down." "No." The word came out more forcefully than Elena intended. "No, please, you are my friend. My only real friend here. I cannot lose that." Samuel looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Is that all I am, Elena? Your friend?" The question hung between them. Elena knew this was a moment that would define everything that came after. She could lie, keep things simple and safe, or she could tell the truth. "No," she said softly. "You are more than that, at least I wish you could be." Samuel closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. "Elena, I have been trying to respect the situation. You are new here, vulnerable. I did not want to take advantage or make things harder for you. But the truth is, I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day we met. The way you stand up to everyone with that quiet strength. The way your eyes light up when you talk about Spain. The sound of your voice, accent and all, I find everything about you beautiful." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "You do?" "Yes, and it kills me to hear people mock you for the very things I love. Your accent is not something to be ashamed of. It is part of who you are, and who you are is extraordinary." He reached out and gently touched her face. "I know I am not much. A half-breed rancher with more cattle than sense and a reputation for being difficult. But if you would have me, I would count myself the luckiest man in the territory." "Sam." Elena reached up and covered his hand with hers. "You are everything. You are kind and strong and honest. You see me, really see me, when everyone else only sees what is different. I have been falling in love with you for months, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid you only saw me as someone who needed help. Afraid I was reading too much into your kindness." Samuel smiled, and it transformed his face. "I am kind to lots of people, Elena, but I do not think about them every waking moment. I do not lie awake at night imagining what it would be like to kiss them." "Oh," Elena felt her heart racing. "And what would it be like this?" Samuel said, and he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might pull away. But Elena wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the pent-up longing of the past months. Samuel pulled her closer, deepening the kiss, and Elena felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Samuel said, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you, and I do not care who knows it." "I love you too," Elena whispered. "So much." They stood there holding each other as the last light faded from the sky. And for the first time since arriving in the Utah Territory, Elena felt truly at home. Of course, their relationship did nothing to quiet the gossip. If anything, it made things worse. Clara and her followers were scandalized that Samuel and Elena were courting. They whispered that Elena had trapped him somehow, used her foreign wiles to ensnare an innocent man. But Samuel did not care. He was open about his feelings, visiting Elena even more frequently, escorting her to town, making it clear to everyone that she had his respect and affection. The ranch wives who had befriended Elena were supportive, happy to see her finding love. And many of the men in town who had always liked Samuel began to warm to Elena as well. If Sam Lawson thought she was special, she must be. 3 months after that first kiss, Samuel proposed. It was not a grand gesture. They were sitting on the porch of the trading post, watching the stars come out when he simply said, "Marry me, Elena." She turned to look at him, her heart in her throat. "What? Marry me? I know it has not been long, but I am certain I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build a future together, raise a family if God blesses us with one. What do you say?" Elena felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, of course yes." Samuel pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. When they broke apart, he was smiling wider than she had ever seen. "I do not have a ring yet, but I will get you one, the prettiest one I can find. I do not need a ring, I only need you. Well, you are getting both." They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Parowan. Elena wore a white dress she had sewn herself from fabric she had brought from Spain, embroidered with traditional patterns her mother had taught her. Samuel wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, looking handsome and nervous. Not everyone in town attended. Clara and her friends made a point of staying away, and a few others seemed uncomfortable with the match. But many people did come. The ranch families Elena had befriended. The men who did business with Samuel. The minister who had taken the time to get to know Elena and appreciated her genuine faith. As they spoke their vows, Elena looked into Samuel's eyes and saw her entire future there. Love, partnership, belonging. Everything she had thought lost when her parents died. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of the congregation. The reception was held at the trading post, which Elena had decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. There was music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. Samuel hardly left her side all evening, his hand always finding hers, his eyes constantly seeking her out in the crowd. "Happy?" he asked as they stood together watching their guests dance. "Happier than I have ever been," Elena replied honestly. I thought I had lost everything when I left Spain, but instead I found you." "We found each other," Samuel corrected. He pulled her close. "And I promise you, Elena, I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret it." After the wedding, Elena moved to Samuel's ranch. It was a beautiful property, nestled in a valley with mountains rising on 3 sides. The house was modest but well built, with a large fireplace, wide plank floors, and windows that let in the mountain light. Samuel had added a room before the wedding, saying he hoped it would be a nursery someday. Elena kept the trading post open, hiring a young man from town named David to manage it during the week while she focused on the ranch. She still went in 3 days a week to handle the ordering and accounting, but she loved having more time to make the ranch house a home. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Samuel was up before dawn every day, seeing to the cattle and horses. Elena tended the garden she had planted, cooked meals, and managed the household. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, talking about their days, making plans for the future. Samuel was right that not everyone accepted their marriage gracefully. Clara and her friends continued to gossip, suggesting that Elena had only married Samuel for his money and that the marriage would not last. But their opinions mattered less and less as Elena built a life she loved. She began to make real friends. Mary Thompson, a rancher's wife with 4 children, became particularly close. Mary was warm and welcoming, with a dry sense of humor that Elena appreciated. She taught Elena about canning and preserving food for the winter, about the rhythms of ranch life, about 100 small things that made frontier living easier. "Do not pay any mind to Clara," Mary said one afternoon as they worked together in Elena's kitchen, putting up tomatoes from the garden. "She is bitter because her own marriage is unhappy and she cannot stand seeing someone else content." "I try not to let it bother me," Elena said, carefully filling jars with tomatoes. "But sometimes it still hurts. I want to be accepted, to belong." "You do belong. Maybe not to everyone, but to the people who matter. Sam adores you. I have known him for years and I have never seen him so happy. That is what counts." Elena smiled. "He makes me happy too, happier than I ever imagined possible." "Good. That is how it should be." Mary paused, giving Elena a knowing look. "Speaking of which, when are you going to tell him?" Elena nearly dropped the jar she was holding. "Tell him what?" "That you are expecting." "I have had 4 babies, Elena. I know the signs." Elena felt her face flush. "I was not certain." "I mean, I suspected, but I wanted to be sure before I said anything." Mary laughed. "Trust me, you are. I would bet money on it. How far along do you think you are?" "Maybe 2 months. I have missed my courses twice and I have been feeling sick in the mornings." "Congratulations." Mary hugged her warmly. "Sam is going to be over the moon." Elena felt a wave of emotion. "I hope so. We have not been married very long." "That does not matter. A baby is a blessing and you two will be wonderful parents." That evening, after dinner, Elena told Samuel. They were sitting by the fireplace, the autumn evening cool enough to warrant a fire. Samuel was reading a livestock journal, and Elena was mending one of his shirts. Her hands were shaking slightly as she set down her sewing. "Sam, I need to tell you something." He immediately set aside the journal, his attention fully on her. "What is wrong? You look pale." "Nothing is wrong, at least I do not think so. I hope not." She took a deep breath. "I am going to have a baby." For a moment, Samuel just stared at her. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Truly, you are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. But Mary says she is sure, and she has had 4 children. Samuel crossed to her in one quick movement and pulled her into his arms. "Elena." "Oh, Elena. This is the best news." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright. "Are you happy? I know we have not been married long." "I am happy. A little scared but happy, are you? Happy does not even begin to cover it. He placed his hand gently on her stomach. A baby, our baby. I am going to be a father. Yes, you are, and you are going to be a wonderful one. Samuel kissed her softly. We are going to be a family. We already are, Elena said. But yes, we are going to be a bigger one. The pregnancy was not easy. Elena suffered terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and the winter was harsh that year. But Samuel was attentive and loving, always making sure she was comfortable and cared for. He reduced his work on the ranch, hiring additional help so he could spend more time at the house. The news of the pregnancy spread quickly through town, and reactions were mixed. Some people were genuinely happy for them. Others, particularly Clara's circle, had snide comments about how quickly it had happened, insinuating impropriety. But Elena and Samuel ignored the gossip. They were too focused on the life they were building. As Elena's belly grew, so did her connection to the community. The upcoming baby seemed to soften some people's attitudes toward her. Women who had been cool before began to warm up, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Elena started to feel like she was finally becoming part of the fabric of Parowan, not just an outsider looking in. In early May of 1879, after a long and difficult labor, Elena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Miguel Samuel Lawson, after her uncle and his father. Samuel wept when he first held his son, his hands trembling as he cradled the tiny bundle. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Elena, exhausted but glowing with joy, watched her husband fall in love with their child. "He has your eyes." "And your stubborn chin," Samuel said with a laugh. He brought the baby to Elena so she could nurse him. Thank you for him, for everything. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible." "We gave this to each other," Elena said softly. The first months of parenthood were exhausting but wonderful. Miguel was a good baby, though he had his fussy moments. Elena marveled at how natural Samuel was with him, how gentle and patient. He would walk the floor with Miguel for hours when the baby was fretful, singing old songs in a low, rumbling voice that always seemed to soothe him. Mary was a constant help, teaching Elena about caring for an infant, offering support and encouragement when Elena felt overwhelmed. Other women in the community reached out as well, bringing food and supplies, sharing their own experiences. Even Clara's hostility seemed to diminish somewhat. She was not friendly exactly, but she stopped making openly cruel comments. It was as if the baby had made Elena more human in her eyes, more relatable. Elena settled into her role as mother with the same determination she had brought to everything else in her new life. She learned to function on little sleep, to soothe a crying baby, to balance the demands of caring for an infant with the needs of the household and the trading post. Samuel was an active partner in parenting, much more involved than most fathers Elena had heard about. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor at night, and proudly showed off his son to anyone who would look. His love for Miguel was evident in every gesture, every word. As Miguel grew from infant to toddler, he became the light of their lives. He had Samuel's gray-green eyes and Elena's dark hair. He was curious and active, always getting into things, exploring his world with fearless enthusiasm. "He is going to be trouble," Samuel said one afternoon, watching 2-year-old Miguel try to climb onto a chair to reach something on the table. "He is going to be just like his father," Elena replied with a smile. "That is what I said. Trouble." Life continued to improve. The ranch prospered under Samuel's management, and the trading post became one of the most successful businesses in Parowan. Elena's hard work and fair dealing had earned her a solid reputation. People respected her, and most had long since stopped commenting on her accent or foreign ways. In fact, some of the younger women in town had started asking Elena about Spain, about fashion in Europe, about her experiences. She was no longer just the foreign woman but Elena Lawson, respected businesswoman, wife, and mother. When Miguel was 3, Elena found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the fall of 1882 she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Rose Marie, and she was the image of Elena with dark eyes and olive skin. Samuel was equally besotted with his daughter. "She is going to break hearts," he said, holding the tiny girl with infinite gentleness. "Not for many years," Elena said firmly. Samuel laughed. "No, not for many years. I will make sure of that." With 2 children, life became busier than ever, but Elena had never been happier. She loved her life on the ranch, loved watching her children grow, loved the deep partnership she shared with Samuel. Their love had only deepened over the years, weathering the challenges of building a life together, of raising children, of running businesses. They still faced occasional prejudice. There were still people who looked down on Elena for being foreign, on Samuel for his mixed heritage, on their children for being both. But those voices grew fewer and quieter as the years passed, drowned out by the evidence of their success and the respect they had earned. One evening when Miguel was 7 and Rose was 4, the family sat together on the porch watching the sunset. It had become a tradition, this quiet time together at the end of the day. Miguel was telling them about something that had happened at school, his words tumbling over each other in his excitement. Rose sat in Samuel's lap, playing with his watch chain. Elena watched them, her heart full. She thought about the terrified young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Parowan nearly a decade ago. She had been so lost, so alone, so certain she would never find her place in this strange new world. But she had found more than a place. She had found a home, a family, a love that had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. Samuel caught her eye and smiled, that warm smile that still made her heart skip a beat. He reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. "How blessed I am," Elena replied. "How lucky." "We both are," Samuel said. He looked at their children, then back at her. "You took a terrible risk coming here. It could have gone so wrong. But it did not. It went right because of you." "Because of us," Samuel corrected. "You did not need me to succeed, Elena. You would have found a way regardless. I was just lucky enough to be there, to see your strength and your beauty when others were too blind or small-minded. You were the first person to make me feel welcome, to make me feel like I could belong. You belonged from the moment you arrived. The town just needed time to realize it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Miguel had moved on to pestering Rose about something, and she was giggling in response. "You ever miss Spain?" Samuel asked. It was a question he had asked before over the years, always with a slight hesitation as if he feared the answer. Elena considered it carefully. "I miss some things. The food, the language, the memories of my parents. But no, I do not wish to go back. This is my home now. You are my home. This family, this life we have built together. I would not trade it for anything." Samuel raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I am glad. Because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You and the children are everything to me." "And you are everything to me," Elena said softly. As the years continued to pass, Elena became a pillar of the Parowan community. She expanded the trading post, adding new products and services. She became known for her charitable work, always willing to extend credit to families in hard times, to donate to the church, to help neighbors in need. Her foreign ways, once mocked, became a source of community pride. The town had a Spanish woman who brought a touch of European sophistication to the frontier. Even Clara eventually made a kind of peace with Elena. It happened when Clara's husband finally left her, and she found herself alone and struggling. Elena reached out with compassion, offering her a job at the trading post. Clara was too proud to accept at first, but when her situation became desperate, she relented. Working together forced them to see each other as people rather than adversaries. They never became close friends, but they developed a grudging respect for each other. "I was wrong about you," Clara admitted one day, years after their initial conflicts. "I thought you were trying to be better than everyone else with your foreign ways. But you were just trying to survive and be yourself. I should not have made that harder." "We all make mistakes," Elena said graciously. "What matters is that we learn from them." Samuel's ranch continued to grow and prosper. He became known as one of the best cattlemen in the territory. His mixed heritage no longer a source of shame, but a point of interest. He taught his children to be proud of all parts of their background, the Spanish and English and Native American threads that wove together to make them who they were. Miguel grew into a tall, strong young man who was interested in learning both the ranch and the trading post business. Rose was bright and spirited, with a quick mind and a kind heart. Both children spoke English and Spanish fluently, Elena having insisted on teaching them her native language. When Utah achieved statehood in 1896, it felt like a new beginning for the whole territory. Parowan celebrated with a festival that lasted 3 days, and Elena and Samuel were among the organizers. Their children, now nearly grown, helped with the preparations. "Can you believe it?" Elena said to Samuel as they watched the festivities. "We have seen so much change." "We have been part of that change," Samuel replied. "We helped build this place into what it is." "Do you think we did well?" "With everything?" Samuel pulled her close. "I think we did better than well. We built a good life, raised good children, and made a difference in our community." "What more could anyone ask? To grow old together," Elena said, leaning against him. "That is the plan," Samuel said, kissing the top of her head, and they did. As the years rolled on into the new century, Samuel and Elena aged together gracefully. Their hair turned gray, their steps slowed, but their love never diminished. They celebrated each anniversary, each milestone, grateful for the life they had built. Miguel eventually married a local girl and took over the main operations of the ranch. Rose married a doctor and moved to Salt Lake City, though she visited often with her growing family. Elena and Samuel became grandparents, then great-grandparents. They watched their legacy grow, generation after generation carrying forward the values they had instilled. Strength, kindness, acceptance, the courage to be different. The trading post eventually closed, no longer needed as larger stores moved into the area. But the ranch remained in the family, a testament to Samuel's hard work and vision. In the summer of 1920, on their 41st wedding anniversary, Samuel and Elena sat once again on the porch of the ranch house. They were both in their 70s now, their bodies worn by years of hard work and frontier life. But they still held hands, still found comfort in each other's presence. "Do you remember the day we met?" Samuel asked. "When Clara was being cruel to you outside the general store?" "Of course I remember. You were my hero that day." "I was just doing what was right, but I am glad I did. That moment changed my whole life." "Mine too," Elena said. She looked out at the mountains, still purple and imposing against the sky. "Everything I have, everything I am started that day, when a cowboy found my differences beautiful instead of strange. They were beautiful. You were beautiful, you still are." Elena laughed softly. "We are both old and gray now, Sam. Does not matter, you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever known. He squeezed her hand. And I would do it all again. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it. So would I, Elena said. I came to this country with nothing but a trunk and hope. And I found everything. I found home. I found love. I found myself. They sat together as the sun set once more, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors it had for more than 4 decades of sunsets they had shared. Their children and grandchildren were inside, preparing dinner, their laughter and voices drifting out through the open windows. Samuel turned to Elena, his eyes still as clear and true as they had been the day they met. I love you, Elena Lawson. I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you beyond the end. And I love you, Samuel Lawson. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You valued me when others found me worthless. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You were never any of those things. You were always extraordinary. The town just needed time to catch up with what I knew the moment I laid eyes on you. They kissed, gentle and sweet, a kiss that held 41 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. Inside the house, someone called them for dinner. Their family was waiting, the family they had created together against all odds. As they stood and walked inside together, still holding hands, Elena thought about the journey that had brought her here, the grief and loss that had sent her across an ocean, the fear and loneliness of those first days in Parowan, the cruelty of small minds and the gift of one man's kindness. She thought about her uncle Miguel, who had given her a chance at a new life without even knowing it, about her parents, who had raised her to be strong and resilient, about all the people who had helped her along the way, and even about those who had tried to tear her down. All of it, every moment of joy and pain had led her here, to this house full of love and family, to this man who still looked at her like she hung the moon, to this life that had exceeded her wildest dreams. The little girl from Barcelona who spoke broken English and knew nothing about frontier life had become a woman who belonged, who had built something lasting, who had loved and been loved in return. And as she sat down to dinner, surrounded by children and grandchildren, her husband's hand in hers, Elena Lawson knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had found her home, not just in a place, but in the hearts of the people she loved and who loved her in return. The story that had begun with mockery and loneliness had become one of acceptance and belonging. The accent that had once marked her as an outsider had become a cherished part of her identity, passed down to her children and grandchildren as a link to their heritage. The foreign ways that had seemed so strange had enriched the community, adding color and depth to the fabric of Parowan, and at the center of it all was a love story. A cowboy who saw beauty where others saw only difference. A woman who found the courage to embrace her new home while honoring her past. Two people who chose each other against the odds and built a life that became a legacy. As the evening wore on and the family shared stories and laughter, Samuel leaned over and whispered in Elena's ear. "Best decision I ever made standing up for you that day." Elena smiled and whispered back, "Best decision I ever made getting off that stagecoach in Parowan. Even with all the hardship, all the people who were cruel, even with that, because it led me to you, and you were worth everything." They shared another kiss as their family good-naturedly teased them about their continued affection after so many years. But Elena and Samuel did not care. They had learned long ago that love was nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to hide. It was to be celebrated, nurtured, and treasured every single day. The evening ended with the family gathering around the piano while Rose played and everyone sang. Elena's voice, still carrying the faint traces of her Spanish accent, blended with Samuel's deeper tones. Their children and grandchildren added their voices, creating a harmony that filled the house with joy. Later, as they prepared for bed, Samuel helped Elena with her buttons, his fingers not as nimble as they once were, but still gentle and sure. She helped him with his boots, a ritual they had shared for decades. As they lay in bed together, Elena's head on Samuel's shoulder, she thought about how far they had come. From that first meeting outside the general store to this moment, 41 years of marriage stretched behind them like a beautiful tapestry, woven with threads of gold and shadow, joy and sorrow, challenge and triumph. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Samuel asked, his arm tightening around her. "For seeing me, for loving me, for making me believe I could belong here." "You did not need me for that, Elena. You belonged here because you chose to belong. You made a place for yourself through hard work and determination. I was just smart enough to recognize it and love you for it." "We made a place for each other," Elena corrected. "Together. That is what marriage is, yes, making space in your life for another person, letting them change you, growing together." "Yes," Samuel agreed. "That is exactly what it is. And I cannot imagine growing with anyone else." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done for more than 40 years, and when morning came, they would wake together, share breakfast, and face another day side by side. As they had done yesterday and would do tomorrow, for as many tomorrows as God granted them, the story of Elena and Samuel Lawson became part of Parowan's history. The Spanish woman who came to town with nothing and built an empire. The cowboy who saw past prejudice to love. The family they created that helped shape the community for generations. Their trading post might have closed, but the building remained, eventually turned into a museum showcasing the history of the area. Inside, among the exhibits, was a section dedicated to Elena and Samuel. Her embroidered wedding dress, his first saddle, the one her Uncle Miguel had sold him, photographs of their family, letters they had written to each other during the rare times they were apart. Visitors would read their story and marvel at it. A love that overcame prejudice and distance. A partnership that built something lasting. A testament to the truth that our differences, the things that make us unique, are not flaws to be hidden but gifts to be celebrated. And somewhere, in the hearts of their descendants who still worked the land Samuel had claimed, who still carried Elena's determination and grace, the love story continued. Not as something frozen in the past, but as a living legacy, a reminder that love sees what others miss and finds beauty in the most unexpected places. Elena Ortega had come to the Utah Territory as a frightened young woman, mocked for her accent and foreign ways. She had left this world decades later as Elena Lawson, beloved matriarch of a family that spanned generations, respected member of her community, and the great love of Samuel Lawson's life. The cowboy had indeed found her differences beautiful. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift of all. Not just his love, though that was precious beyond measure, but the gift of seeing herself through his eyes, of recognizing her own worth, of understanding that she did not need to change to be valued. She only needed to be herself, fully and completely, and the right person would love her not despite her differences but because of them. It was a lesson they passed down to their children and grandchildren. Be proud of who you are. Honor where you come from. Do not let small minds make you feel small. Love boldly and completely. Build something that lasts, and in the end, that was the true happy ending. Not just that Elena and Samuel found each other and built a life together, though that was wonderful, but that their love created ripples that spread out through time, touching lives they would never meet, inspiring people they would never know. Their story, which began with a dusty stagecoach arrival and a cowboy's simple act of kindness, became a legacy of love, acceptance, and the courage to embrace what makes us different. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations. And it all started the day Samuel Lawson looked at Elena Ortega and saw not a foreign woman to be mocked, but a beautiful soul to be treasured. That moment of recognition, of truly seeing another person, changed two lives forever. It built a family, shaped a community, and proved that love, real love, sees with the heart rather than the eyes. That is how their story ended, or perhaps more accurately how it began, because love like theirs does not really end. It transforms, continues, lives on in the lives it touched and the hearts it changed. In every descendant who stands tall and proud of their heritage. In every person who chooses kindness over cruelty, acceptance over prejudice, love over fear. Elena and Samuel's love story became legend in Parowan, Utah. A reminder that the Wild West was not just about cowboys and cattle, shootouts and saloons. It was also about people finding each other against impossible odds, building homes in harsh places, and creating beauty in the wilderness. And at its heart was a simple truth that remains as relevant now as it was then. The things that make us different are not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. And when we meet someone who sees those differences as beautiful, who loves us not despite who we are but because of it, we have found something precious indeed. That is the story of Elena and Samuel Lawson. Two people who found each other, loved each other, and built a life that mattered. A cowboy who saw beauty where others saw strangeness. A woman who had the courage to be herself in a world that wanted her to change. And the love that grew between them, strong enough to weather any storm, deep enough to last beyond a lifetime. Their happily ever after was not perfect. There were still challenges, still sorrows, still days that tested them. But they faced everything together, hand in hand, heart to heart. And that made all the difference in the end. Elena never did lose her accent. Her English was fluent, but it always carried the music of Spanish in its rhythms. And Samuel never stopped finding it beautiful. Just as he never stopped finding her beautiful, even when they were both old and gray. Their children and grandchildren would remember them always holding hands, always sharing secret smiles, always clearly in love even after decades of marriage. They became the model their descendants aspired to, proof that true love was not just a fairy tale but a real possibility for those brave enough to reach for it. And when people asked them the secret to their long and happy marriage, Samuel and Elena always gave the same answer. See each other, they would say. Really see each other. Not what you want the other person to be, but who they actually are. Love that person, differences and all, and never stop choosing each other every single day. It was wisdom earned through experience, tested by time, proven by a life well lived together. And it was the greatest legacy they could leave behind, greater than the ranch, the business, or the material wealth. The legacy of love that saw, accepted, and celebrated the beautiful truth of who we really are. That was the story of the Spanish woman and the cowboy, of Elena and Samuel, of a love that transformed two lives and echoed through generations. A love that proved that when we embrace our differences rather than hiding them, when we see others with hearts open rather than minds closed, we create something truly extraordinary. And they lived that truth every day of their lives together, from that first meeting outside the general store to their final days in each other's arms. A love story for the ages, set against the backdrop of the Wild West, proving that the greatest adventures are not about conquering land but about opening hearts. Elena Ortega Lawson and Samuel Lawson. Two names forever linked, two hearts forever intertwined, two souls that found in each other exactly what they needed. And in finding it, they created something that would outlast them both. A legacy of love, acceptance, and the beautiful truth that our differences are what make us extraordinary. That is where their story ends, and where it begins anew with each person who hears it and takes its lesson to heart. Love sees what others miss. Love celebrates what others criticize. Love builds bridges where others build walls. And sometimes, love arrives on a dusty stagecoach in a small town in the Utah Territory, wearing a foreign accent and carrying a trunk full of dreams. And if we are very lucky, we are wise enough to recognize it, brave enough to embrace it, and blessed enough to spend a lifetime treasuring it. Just as Samuel treasured Elena, and Elena treasured Samuel from that fateful day in 1878 until their story reached its natural, beautiful conclusion many decades later. A conclusion that was not really an ending at all, but a transformation into something eternal. The kind of love that never really dies, but lives on in the hearts and lives of all those it touched. And that is the very best kind of happily ever after.